Hello, everyone. This is John Armstrong. Thanks for joining the Advisory Committee for Transportation Choices meeting tonight. I guess it's June 29th. We haven't met in a while due to COVID. I'm glad we were able to do this with teams. I want to thank Kristen and county and APS staff for helping us make this happen. I think what we'll do tonight is start off with a couple of kind of admin items. Couple things. I said this earlier, but if everyone could just proactively mute their line, and then when you do speak, unmute, but sort of try to keep it muted at all times, because all it takes is one line that's unmuted to distract her. I'm sure you're all aware. I think public comment. I think Kristen, do you want to say anything about public comment now at the start?
Sure. If there are any comments on or questions about the work that the committee discusses this evening, please send them to the Engage page or make them through the Engage page on APS /Engage. And if you want to put a tagline in that just says ACTC public comment or comment, then our staff will know to sort of tag it and send it our way so that we can distribute questions and answer them.
Thank you so much. So a couple things. Wanted to see if we could approve the minutes from March. Hopefully everyone had a chance to read them. Is there a motion to approve?
No, what?
I move to approve the minutes for March.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so the minutes pass. Thank you. Another housekeeping note, we have, I am moving off as chair, and we have a new chair and a new vice chair. I think they're both on the call tonight. So I just want to do a quick thank you and introduce Josh Folb is the new chair of the ACTC, and Elizabeth Kiker is the new vice chair of the ACTC. So we'll be meeting up shortly to kind of do some transition stuff, but I'll stay involved. I'm not going anywhere, but I am kind of moving off as chair. So I wanted to make that announcement. Congratulations to Josh and Elizabeth, and thank you so much for stepping up. We really appreciate it. All right, what's next on the agenda? I think tonight we've got a couple of items. We're going to move forward. I think we're first going to hear from Jillian. As we move through the meeting, this is new to all of us. I think we're using this in our daily lives, whether it's for work or play, but we're getting used to these virtual meetings. But some ground rules, again, please keep your line on mute. If you have a question, use the chat function. We'll be monitoring it, and raise your hand. So I think typing in a question, but also using the raise hand function for Teams to try to get someone's attention. And then we'll try to keep on time as much as possible. We're already a few minutes late, but I think we'll catch up. I think the agenda's in front of us. So I think first we're going to hear from Jillian. Hopefully 5 minutes is enough for you, Jillian. But we want to hear about the task force that she's on right now. So I will pass it over to Jillian. Did I miss anything, Kristen?
Nope.
Okay. Good. I'm going to hand it off to you, Jillian. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So I am the representative from this committee to the task force on reopening schools. There's a lot involved in reopening schools, and the task force has had a lot of information to digest and discuss. Generally, the way the task force has been working is APS staff sends us information on Fridays. We digest it over the weekend, and then on Mondays we have meetings where we break out into small groups. We have a short presentation going over some of the really high level facts and things to discuss. And then we break out into small groups and discuss the topics of the day. We come back together. There's sort of readouts from the small groups, and sometimes there's some voting. It has been very high level, as you might imagine, with a group of that size. I believe there are 35 or more members on that group. So while when we're in the small groups, we can get into some deeper discussion, as an entire task force, we haven't really. And we've been very much led by APS staff on discussing the things that they want to discuss. So as many of you, hopefully everybody saw last week, the superintendent presented APS's plan for reopening, which involves two options for families. One is online only. It's pretty simple. Well, it's at least sounds simple. It's students just will be entirely online for every day of the week. The other one is a hybrid, where students are in school 2 days a week and not in school 3 days a week. Monday, everyone will be out of school, and teachers will have effectively a work day so that they can do planning and get everything ready. And then one group will go to school Tuesday and Wednesday, a different group will go to school Thursday and Friday. So now that we've gotten the basic structure of what reopening will look like, the task force is now turning to some of the logistics of reopening. Today's meeting was on health and safety. I was actually double checking, and I apologize for not knowing this off the top of my head. I think transportation is the next meeting or the meeting after that. And I apologize that I'm blanking on what the third meeting is, but I will look it up and put it into the comments so that everyone knows. So if anyone has any comments, any questions, I'm happy to take them. If at any point you have any feedback or want to give any feedback to the task force, please let me know. And I think that's it.
Thanks for doing the work, Jillian.
Yeah, I'm very happy. It's been very interesting to hear all of the perspectives. I will say, actually, I should include this. A lot of the discussion has been about how there are concerns from the family perspective, from the student perspective, but there are also a lot of concerns from the staff perspective. And everybody wants to stay safe. Everybody wants everyone to stay safe. A lot of the time, those concerns are very similar, but sometimes staff has concerns that are different from families. Also, with instruction, the elementary schools seem to have one set of concerns having to do actually with instruction and with health and safety. It seems like the sets of concerns, while there are many concerns that go for all students, there are a unique set of concerns for elementary school and a separate set of concerns for middle school and high school. So it's been very productive to talk through that with people from differing perspectives. There's also people who on the task force who are involved with English language learners and involved with special education. So we are hearing from all sides. We're hearing concerns from people sort of from all different parts of our school systems that we're keeping everything in mind as we go forward.
Yeah, thank you, Jillian. I'm also on the task force with you.
Oh, right. I think I am on the task force as a representative of this committee. I think that's the difference. I think Janet,
yes,
I'm sure
I'm representing the Superintendent Advisory Committee on Immigrant Students and Refugees.
Great. So I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, that there is, like you said, there's people are worried. Not only staff, community, and parents are worried about transportation, and I want to hear it tonight. but they worry about everything in general. And I don't think there will be a clear picture on opening the schools, although we have one model, but I'm not sure if it's going to work today. When they said that kids under 10 years old, they're not going to use a mask, and then it created a lot of comment within the parents. Now they changed their opinion now. So I don't know what we're going to do, but we still have to go to the meetings and see and observe and give our opinion and take the voice from the others.
Hey, Jillian, this is John. Can I ask you a quick question?
Of course.
And I apologize. I had to step away to ask some folks to be quiet in my house. But so you maybe cover this. But are there certain, like, does this task force, is it just for a certain number of meetings, and once a decision's made, it's disbanded, or are you guys going to be meeting kind of all throughout, you know, for as long as it takes, depending on even during the school year, or is it purely just a return to school strategy?
That is a good question. I think that we have meetings on the calendar into August.
Yeah.
And I think they are definitely looking for us to help. So I don't know if they will basically ask us to continue helping after that. Janet or Nancy, you guys might know the answer to that.
Well, what I understand is to help them open up the schools, and then if they need us to continue helping, we're going to go ahead and continue over to, you know, more months to come. But the focus right now is to help them open the schools. And we're not going to have a meeting next week. If we have meetings every Monday, but next week we're not going to have because of the holiday, and then we'll have the following Monday.
Okay. Any other questions for Jillian or Janeth? All right, I think Kristen. Like,
Okay,
Kristen's
thanks,
up
John.
now with the bulk of the evening's presentations. So
Right.
I'll hand it over to you.
Okay. I also wanted to let you know I've got John Carton on speaker on my phone. So he's listening. And John, if you have something, I resent you the link. But if you have a question, just give me a yell and I'll pass it on. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing the agenda, and I'm going to start sharing a little PowerPoint that I put together to kind of walk us through the transportation side of things. So yeah, Jillian, I know there's lots of questions, and I won't say there's any easy answers, but I think we've got some things that we can do to help mitigate some of the issues that we're going to be encountering. So, all right, everybody, hold on a sec. And I'm also going to ask if hold your questions to the end if you can. I think it'll be easier for sort of John and I to manage maybe comments and hands if we can wait and do it at the end. So, okay, here goes nothing. Can we see this?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All right. All right. So transportation on everybody's mind. So the first thing, Jillian has already kind of run through this, but the superintendent provided this information to the school board on Thursday that the recommended in-person instructional model is actually a hybrid in-person and online, and the students will be broken up into two groups, and they'll go 2 days a week, and it looks like they'll probably be going successively. And I feel like my slide might be messed up a little bit. I think group 1 actually goes up top. Oh, sorry. And now we're getting ahead of ourselves. So this, I think, so basically we're talking about 50% of our students attending school at one time, or at least 50% will be, offered to attend school at one time. So given that, sort of what does this mean for transportation? In addition to our instructional model, we have guidance from the state as to what our bus transportation should look like. And right now we are operating under the assumption that we can only fit 12 students per bus. And that's for our big buses, our 77 seaters. So just to kind of refresh your memory, to tell you what we look like typically, we have, about 17,000, a little over 17,000 students that are eligible every year to be transported, and a little over 11,000 of them ride. So if there was an even split, which, we'll try to do, we're talking about, 5,600 students being transported 2 days a week, and the other transported the other 2 days of the week. So I had done, both Dariba and I actually had done some rough calculations when we saw this number come out, and I started looking at just the actual ridership. And to transport those 5,500 students or so would take about 500 or so trips every morning and every afternoon. And that would be essentially kind of going, making one trip with 12 students, coming back, picking up the next 12, depending on, what a route would typically handle. We have routes that have, almost 70 kids on them, and then we have routes that have, 10 or 12. So it's the ones that handle a lot of students that really would require sort of this back and forth, trying to grab all of those students until we, got the 50% or whatever that were on that route. Now, Dariba, who, does the planning side, and so he looks at, eligible students. So you can imagine how many more trips that was going to take. I think he was up around 800, maybe 900 to plan for the 17,000. So, we're doing some things to try and understand who will actually ride and what that might look like. And I think that's gonna factor in some of the decision making around how we develop our routing. So just typically, looking at our mode share over the past, 7 years or so, we have conducted our APS Go surveys. And I just got some preliminary results back from our 2020 surveys, which, despite the fact that they were impacted by lower response rates, what I'm seeing is, some level of consistency over the years. So it makes me feel slightly better about the fact that our survey was interrupted. But we do see that, we've got typically, we've got more than 40% of our students who are taking the school bus. And we're, looking at maybe around 29, 30% who are in a family vehicle. So when we started to ask, and for those of you who filled in the survey that came out a couple of weeks ago, we asked on that survey the question, do you think if you're, your student typically takes the school bus, do you think that you'll use it? And what we got back from that was, about 35% said that they would not use it. And then when we asked those folks what they would do to get to school, almost 54% said that they would probably drive. And so this, starts to give me pause, maybe more than that, because it means that there's going to be more than typical car ridership around schools. Now, granted, we're talking about half, so I was just doing some quick math, as I am wont to do. But 35% of the 11,000 ridership number is about 4,000 riders. So 35% who said, no, we don't think we'll take it. So in the end, we potentially have, 2,000 fewer riders per group, right? Because we're only handling 50% at a time. So that will mean fewer loops that are necessary. So that's probably a good thing on the bus side. But it also means that about 2,100 of those students would now be driven. So if you break that in half, that's an additional 1,000, little over 1,000 or so driving to school, in addition to those who are typically driving, which is, close to 30%. So I think we need to do some thinking about how to manage and mitigate the driving potential, just because, we know, we've discussed it at the committee before, that we have had issues with drop-off at schools in, several of our locations. And this, could theoretically only exacerbate the problem. So we need to do some thinking about that. So a couple of things I wanted to just talk about. The first of which is, just some ideas that we have for how we mitigate the bus capacity issue. The fact that we aren't going to be able to handle, 65 students on a bus. So some of the things we're talking about, and I'll show you a little scribbly map that I've, been working on. I think we can reduce some of the bus demand by increasing some of the elementary school walk zones in areas that are close to schools. And some locations, may require additional crossing support. But what I did was to start to go back to some of the work that we did in the spring of 2018 with school-based groups, looking at where they had, initially thought there were areas for expansion. I kind of took a closer look at those areas to see if, some of them made sense and could be supported under these sort of emergency conditions. So I'm working on that. I think we continue to proceed with plans to move our option schools to centralized stops so that we can move the buses more quickly as they run through, I'm just going to call them loops for the time being, move more quickly to pick up, the next batch of 12 students that they might have to go pick up. And in that same vein, consolidate some of our neighborhood bus stops. So again, the buses can move more quickly in getting the next batch of students back to school. And then, Jillian, I'm not sure if you alluded to this or not, but we are planning to send out an intent to return survey for parents, and we're asking them, two major questions. One, of course, is which model, which instructional model do you plan to use for your student? Will it be the hybrid, in-person, online option, or will you go to the full virtual model? And then if they've decided that they will do the in-person model, we'll ask them a follow-up question, which will ask, asking them specifically, will you use APS bus transportation, or will you provide transportation for your students? And then they get an option to, to tell us which mode they plan to use. And then lastly, I think we have to think seriously about moving our drop-off areas away from the front of schools so that the buses can, quickly disembark their students and head back out to pick up the next group of students. I know some of our, our drop-offs, our buses are disembarking maybe towards, the back of school, or they go down to the parking lot and turn around. So we want to be able to move the buses fairly quickly through the school, or in and out of the school. And then this question of how do we address additional driving to school? Well, we encourage families to walk and bike if they are within, striking distance for these modes. Walking, 3/4, if you're within, a half, 3/4 of a mile, that should be, that's a manageable walk. Biking, you could come from farther away. So taking a look at some of the bike infrastructure around the school, establishing walking school buses and bike trains to support the new walking areas and additional biking to school. I think those are things that we definitely want to work on over the summer and getting the word out for those kinds of things. And then establish some remote drop-off areas near schools so that families can park there and walk into their school to avoid car and bus conflicts and congestion and also additional gathering in front of schools. So I think we've got a lot of good things that we can do to encourage more active transportation and to discourage driving if we can. And then I just wanted to, say a few words about staff TDM too, because of course, this committee, we often talk about staff TDM. And we have a number of our staff that take transit. And so right now, I don't know if William or Lynn are on, they can speak to this little during our discussion, but we do have some changes in scheduling that are in operation right now. They will hopefully be back to somewhat normal pace in the fall. But will we still have reduced bus capacity? That may be in play. And then, of course, staff may have, just simply have safety concerns about riding transit. I think our walkers will still walk, which would be great. Maybe we can get some more walkers. Biking staff, I think, will likely still bike. And, what I'm looking to do, and I talked to Catherine a little bit about this, is, can we create a bike mentor program within staff to encourage new cyclists? I think I'd like to work on that a bit with some of our staff. In terms of carpooling, we may have some who continue and some may not. I know we do have some staff who are related. They live in the same household. They will likely continue to carpool, which would be great. And then for those who drive, we may need to establish some remote parking locations at schools with constrained parking. So that's probably, something we'll have to consider as well. Okay, now in terms of the timeline that Dr. Duran put out on Thursday, we, he has, in the week of August 24th, we'll communicate, final details to include transportation. So I would, I want to be able to get more information out earlier about some of the things that we're working on. So we'll be kind of developing a communication plan to do some of that, especially when we're talking about any walk zone expansions, and trying to establish walking school buses and bike trains and things like that. I also wanted to share that I'm working to bring on some bus routing assistance with the MIT folks. We've talked about them before, to help us do some scenario planning. We know kind of where we're headed with the 2-day model. They'll be able to help us understand how long it would take for us to get our buses to school and whether or not we might need to make any timing adjustments to the start of school. Will we have to stagger it and that kind of thing. We can also, they should be able to help us understand if we, we've talked before about we don't always have a full complement of drivers on any given day. Well, if that is still the case, and or perhaps some of our employees, we have COVID issues. What would happen to the bus system, if we were down by X% on a given day? So I'm looking forward to working with them and kind of teasing out some of this and creating as efficient a bus system as we can make given the circumstances. And I think that's basically all I have. The rest is just for discussion. So John, I'll turn it back over to you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Sure, thanks, Kristen. I think the way to manage questions you see the little hand in the kind of the icon bar towards the lower end of the screen within the Teams interface. You could raise your hand. I can start us off with questions if you like, and I'll monitor to see you get us started. One question I have, Kristen, is, do you know anything? So one of the things key when we would have drop off or walk, there's a pretty big grace period in the morning. They'd have morning recess, so you could drop your kid off, pretty early, like maybe 45 minutes before the bell. Is that still going to be the case, or are these windows of time going to be shorter to prevent kids from interacting? Or have you heard anything about that? Like, will there be a shorter window of drop off rather than a larger window like at Key where you had 45 minutes of pre or before school playtime in the playground?
John, I have not. I don't know, Jillian, if you all have talked about that in the task force, or I know John Chadwick is on and Nancy is on. I don't know if either of you have any comments on that. I suspect we, to the extent that we, can keep students from gathering, I think we'll be doing that. But I'm not sure that has been sorted out yet.
So I just want to throw that out there. If they reduce those windows, then you're going to have more people dropping off at the same time rather than throughout the 45 minutes or whatever time is available during school.
John,
right, now that's a very good point.
This is John Chadwick. We haven't got into that level of detail yet, and when as we do, it will be a combination of how the schools feel they can handle it, and then trying best handle it, and then trying to come up with some uniformity through the school division so the messaging is constant.
Okay. Looks like Jillian has her hand up.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Kristen. I think there's a lot of opportunity in a crisis. I think we talk about that. You hear a lot of that discussion. There are some things that this group, this committee has talked about for years, which could be accelerated and put into place to help address with this crisis. So you brought up a lot of those. One is absolutely having remote drop off for people who drive. It makes it a little bit harder to drive, just the experience a little less attractive, which sort of puts a tiny thumb on the scale away from that, which helps keeps our roads safer. I think we should also be thinking about that when we talk about how we design these things. For example, other ideas that we've talked about in this group, which I hope we can see come to reality, are walking school buses and bike trains. I do hope that APS, it sounds like from your presentation, APS is thinking of leaving that to the PTAs. I hope that's not the final decision. Not every school has a PTA, and not every PTA is set up in a way that's going to do that successfully. So this is a transportation issue. I hope that APS Transportation can do that and can find some partners. For example, I am the representative from the Bicycle Advisory Committee. People who bike often are very enthusiastic about biking. If we put out a call for volunteers to lead bike trains, even if they aren't parents, I think there is an opportunity there that we could find some volunteers to help out. But we have to think about what the experience of arriving at school is going to be. So kids are going to come in the building. There's going to be some thought about, are you actually sick today before the kids continue on to class? So if that's going to create a bottleneck at the door, we should absolutely think about prioritizing the kids who are coming, walking, biking, and coming off the school buses to encourage people to come through those ways. And we should think about the window. It's interesting that John Armstrong asked if we were going to decrease the window for drop-off. I actually had thought we would need to increase the window for drop-off if there is going to be a bottleneck at the front door. So we should think about all of those things. Even transit. So the research coming out of Europe is that, and Japan, is that there's been very few documented cases of transmission on transit. And so this might be an opportunity to expand the pilot that we had started to have high school students take transit to school. It seems like it would be cheaper to just pay the $4 a day for the few days that those kids go to school than it would be to run so many loops of school buses. So hopefully we can find a way to use transit as part of our bag. And then carpooling, that's an interesting and difficult nut to crack. But I think one of the things, especially on the elementary school level, that we're going to be talking about is partnering families together so that there's interaction between kids, but through a small group of kids. So for example, if there's a family down the street from us that goes to the same school that have similar age kids, if we decide to expand our pod to them, we could, and we could carpool with them because we've already expanded our pod to them to school. I think encouraging things like that could help us reduce the number of kids at school. And we have to remember that COVID is absolutely a public health issue, but driving is also a public health issue. And having lots of cars on the road, especially around schools, could lead to injury and even deaths of our students who are getting to school. So we need to think hard about transportation and balance the public health concern of COVID with a very real public health danger of cars. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen, or Jillian. Kristen has her hand up, but actually, before I hand it back to you, Kristen, I'll just clarify. I'm not advocating for a shorter time window. I'm just wondering if the school system will shorten the time windows because they don't want kids congregating the way they typically do before school. So it's just something, it's more of a question for what's going to happen.
Quick
Okay,
technical side, Kristen, I know you offered and I turned you down. I don't see a hand anywhere. I've Googled it. I've tried. Where do you raise your hand? I'm so sorry.
It's right next. It's right next to the mute button, or it's like two.
Do you
on
see?
So,
Elizabeth, do you see a toolbar?
If you move your mouse, kind of on your.
So some
screen.
people don't have it.
Yeah.
We've encountered this in the task force. Some people don't have it, especially if you're using an app on Windows.
An Apple, so it doesn't have it. That's fine. Sorry.
Okay. If you don't have it, sometimes it's in more actions. It's like the 3 dots.
Right. It's.
But
not,
if it's not there anywhere, then yeah, as Nancy typed in the chat bar, there's a chat bar. That's generally what we do, is just say I have a question or something like that in the chat bar.
Okay.
So,
Elizabeth, do you have a question?
No, I just thought maybe other people were having trouble too. Sorry.
Well, it's good to know. If you are having trouble, as Jillian said, why don't you just throw, or if you can get to the chat function, put your question in there, or say, please call on me. And if you can't get to the chat function, then wait for a pause after somebody has responded, and then insert yourself politely, I would ask. We have Jim Larson with his hand up.
Thank you. So one of the challenges we have at the state level, and we're working on this right now from the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, is how we are able to promote carpooling. There's some very strict guidelines. Right now, we are prohibited from promoting carpooling. So I'm just giving you the latest. So we're working on that, and we've been talking about schools, versus carpooling for business. And in fact, I have a meeting tomorrow with the state about that subject. How many people can carpool? We are actually prohibited at Arlington County from promoting carpooling as of today. So I just want to share that. It's a challenge. I'm not complaining. I'm just letting you know what's going on in the Commonwealth right now. Just want to share that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
You bet.
Trying to look over here. I see that, Josh, I see you have several comments in the chat area. Do you want to just share them verbally? by chance?
Sure. So just a few thoughts. One, thank you, Jim, because that was exactly my concern on carpooling. That it's a school system. We have a hard time saying, hey, that's a good idea. The idea of spreading out bike racks around the building so that they're not all in one space and you're forcing a lot of kids into less than 6 foot space as they arrive to school. And I realize some of these bike racks are fixed, so we might have to look into something else. Have we thought about the idea of shifting school hours, even not necessarily by more than a half hour, so that a bus that's doing loops, we can maximize the loopability? Did I invent a word right there? I don't know. And what was the other? There was something else. Oh, I know they're doing this on metro buses, and I'm sure they're talking about this at the school level. Are we offering some kind of physical barrier for the bus drivers to protect them? Because while the kids will be spaced 6 feet apart, if there's no plastic of some kind, then every child comes within 3 inches of the bus driver all day, and that's not going to last very long. So I think those were my thoughts. Obviously no one's going to have a whole lot of answers right now, but those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Josh. So looks like Kimberly Wilkes. Kim.
Hi, good evening. With regard to the bus drivers having shields placed on the bus, we're not permitted to add anything, attachments to the bus, but we have requested for them to have shields, the face shields, the mask, and all the other PPEs for them, and additional masks for the students.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
John, just a quick question. So is the presentation still up or is it gone?
I don't, I
It's
see.
not up anymore.
Yeah, I don't think it's up.
Okay, good. I was asked to take it down.
I think questions are, any other questions? No one's, right, Jim and Kim's hands are still up. I'm assuming they were just left up, but
Jillian, you had a note in the chat.
Yes, just the last thing that I forgot was we've talked a lot about the county helping possibly with small infrastructure changes, improvements to help getting to school work. So for example, if we're going to establish remote drop-off locations, we might need the county to have no parking during drop-off and pickup, or limited time parking during pickup or something like that in that remote drop-off location. We might need small infrastructure changes to make biking or walking to schools more accessible. My example, just because it's one that I noticed recently, was the ATS building is very close to the Custis Trail, so that would make sense to have bike trains for students going to Arlington Traditional School to come down the Custis Trail. But the last block along George Mason is actually not very good for biking. A protected bike lane, a temporary protected bike lane, just put up a couple of Jersey barriers in the street and make that happen, would actually connect ATS to the Custis Trail. So I hope that the county is open to having those conversations. And if there's a way that we can all identify those issues or make those suggestions to the county staff, it would be great if we could hear from them.
yeah, this is John. I'm going to jump in real quick because I agree with Jillian. I also wanted to point out that if improvements are made or short-term changes are made where things like vehicles are going to be restricted, I'd ask the county to look into using more than just temporary signage. I know that as an example, over near the Trader Joe's in Clarendon, the adjacent paid meter parking was supposed to have no parking, and the signage was up so that pedestrians could access the parking lane, but the signs were ripped down and there were cars parked. And I actually have a picture of one of the signs that remained, but the lane was fully parked. So signs don't keep cars from parking where they shouldn't be, especially in a temporary basis. So something that actually deters cars, like concrete, would be great. Josh has his hand up.
Yeah, just going back to the thing we talked about remote drop-off and building maps for each of the schools. I said in the chat, but I just want to make sure it's said publicly. The 3 or 4 times my son who bikes needed to be dropped off at school, I never went anywhere close to that bus loop. I always had dropped him off 2 blocks away and said, okay, that was part of the deal. You got a ride, now you walk. And I think one of the things with a remote drop-off is we don't need to think about it just being a location on the school property, but some places within 2 blocks, maybe even 3, that do not require any serious street crossing, because that's exactly what I would do for my son. Is I would drop him off over on the far edge of TJ on the other side of the park, and he still had a bunch of walking to do, but he had no significant crosses. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity to be had there, and parents will. I don't think we're going to deter some parents from driving, but I think there's some who are going to want to drive, and if we can simply spread it out, then we may never see crowding anywhere near the front of the schools. I think we have an obligation to help with that.
I don't see any hands up. So the floor is open if anyone wants to. Oh, Jillian's hands up.
Just to piggyback off of what Josh said, I totally agree, and I think that will also help with the safety of biking and walking. If you have tons of cars coming to a school, biking to that school or walking to that school is going to be really scary. But if the cars are coming, to this side a couple blocks away, and we could come in from a different route, I think you really help you solve that safety issue.
All right, Hui.
Hi, everyone. So I heard a few basically suggestions, very good ones, about how we can improve the transportation system, either temporarily or permanently, or maybe start with temporary and then go to permanent, just to support the school reopening plan. I will say that is the county's position. We want to support a safe and proper school reopening. I mean, we're all parents anyways. We're all in this together. So, and we are actually in a conversation with the school staff in terms of getting the specifics, because we have 30-some schools and they all have individual challenges, and the layout, the transportation system next to it is different. So what we're trying to get at is we're trying to actually quickly get into the weeds to look at each location. Is there anything we can improve? Another thing is, John, in terms of your comment about the temporary signage and the permanent signage, we are looking at, because when we set up those temporary no parking and pick up drop off only zones, we were trying to react to COVID, so we did it in like 2 weeks. Now we are actually looking at, are there locations that such setup should stay? So we do have teams that started to look at that. Of course, because COVID is such a evolving phenomenon, and with the phase opening, and we now see nationwide there are rolling back on the opening. So we have to stay agile. I will say my suspicion is many things probably will stay in more of a temporary nature, and then slowly getting to the permanent setup. If you notice, I mean, we actually did. We received residents' reports on the temporary signage being torn off at a few rains, it's gone. We have went out to replace them. So whenever we saw that, we will replace them. We are also working with the police, making sure that they are providing, I think they are more leaning on educating than really writing tickets, but nonetheless, that's part of the enforcement. One thing is, for example, the pickup and drop-off zone, which I think will later, probably be utilized for school as well. You won't be able to block them off because you still need to allow the cars to pull up to the curb and stop and drop off their kids. And will there be one or two people who decided I'm just going to park my car there? Probably you will. So that is, I will say, a community-wide educating our parents, talk to the neighbors, remind them not to do that. It's going to be a challenge. But overall, we just want to make sure we are supporting the school as much as we possibly can.
Thanks, Wei. I think Kristen is next. Oop, Kristen.
Kristen, you're on mute.
I am on mute. Bingo. Elizabeth has a question or comment.
I just, I guess I wanted to know if this terrible crisis in our country is opening up more creativity or innovation. I heard Jillian say earlier about how a lot of the things we've talked about for years could be possible here, not only on transportation, I know that's our focus here, but like school start times, staggered starts, making high schoolers be able to sleep in later. And then I hear Wei on the issues around temporary, but I just know that other cities have found a way. I would be willing to contribute to purchase those cones, the traffic cones. I know they must be very expensive, but it just feels like every time we're out on the trails or walking, which we are all out so much, biking and walking right now, it is so crowded. It is such a public health concern, but there is no movement in Arlington, not even one place, except there's with the paper signs. And it's just, Arlington is so creative and innovative and so successful in so many ways. It's why I love to live here. And I just can't believe we're not out in front of this, showing the rest of the country how well we can do it. We're so small. We have such a great populace that wants to bike and walk, as you can see from even the comments on this. I just really wish we could do that, because if my kids felt safe when we were biking on Glebe or George Mason now on the weekends, then they might be able to bike to school. But as long as they're terrified when they're biking with me, they're not going to want to bike to school. Mm-hmm. It's a feedback loop.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I think, is that Jim's hand up again? Jim?
Elizabeth, actually, we're working on that very subject at the state level. This won't surprise you. Sorry to say it. The rest of the state is not as enlightened as Arlington is.
You're kidding me.
I know you're surprised. So we're trying to make the point that this is a wonderful opportunity and that we have to work on this. And I don't have any magical solutions yet. I'm also part of a national association dealing with the whole school subject. And you're right. We have a great opportunity for people to feel comfortable and make it happen. And I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jim. The floor is open if anyone wants to chime in. Let me check the comments to see if there's anyone asking for the floor. Oh, looks like Nancy has her hand raised.
I just wanted to thank Kristen for the presentation. It's almost without words the work that everybody is doing in our personal families and on the staff. The challenges just keep coming without any clear-cut answers. I think we're just going to be making the best decisions we can in the situation that we're in. And we're going to be trying things and fixing things and trying new things and fixing things. So I just really wanted to say thank you to both the county and the school staff for that. But I also noted that Matt DeFerrante was on here. I think he may have left, but he was here briefly. He is the liaison from the county and became that with the passing away of Eric Gutschall. So I wanted to acknowledge that Matt was here, and he has been working with me and Kristen to really get himself up to speed to understand what the committee is doing. I think he's off, isn't he? He's not here anymore, right? Anyway, I wanted to John, is he here?
Let me double check.
Okay. Anyway, I wanted to acknowledge he's here, and he has been staying close, and he and I have been talking a lot. It took a lot to have this meeting. There are a lot of rules that we have to follow for FOIA, and it required the county staff to actually televise this and put it live on Facebook. We have some different rules in the school system, but it took us some time. So I just want you all to know that the government is moving, but we aren't really good at all this yet, but we're trying. So again, I'm just trying to applaud everybody who's making the effort, because we are having a public meeting, and we've all really needed to do this, and we really needed Kristen to run these ideas by you. So if any of you have any more suggestions or just conversation, all of this is going to keep evolving, and our staff really needs to know what you're thinking, because frankly, everybody's tired, and we need a big brain. We need everybody's big brain together right now to get us through this. So do that. And then I also wanted to really, really thank John Armstrong for being the chair of ACTC for 3 years, right, John?
I don't know how long.
And Kristen Haldeman was the first chair of ACTC and then went to work for APS. And I just want to thank them, because I was really looking forward to this meeting tonight. This is the most positive, creative group. So keep going. I'm just encouraging you and giving you a little think time to really throw out your ideas and suggestions to Kristen and chew them over together. And then Jillian can make sure if it's important that they're said in the meeting, in the task force meeting, as can Jeanette, and just keep going. And the only reflection I wanted to make as a mom was that it was interesting that John Armstrong mentioned that key kids could get dropped off early. There's some schools where they absolutely already will not do that, that the doors are not opened until an exact time, and you're not allowed to drop your kids off. So there is variability across the system. And I'm just mentioning that because it's not a presumption you can make at all the schools, and it really depends on the management of that school. But maybe that's also something that needs to be regularized. But more than anything, I wanted to say thank you all. Note that Matt DeFerrante had been here, and please keep talking, because Kristen and the staff and even the county staff need to hear from you. Thank you all.
Thanks, Nancy. I think Dennis has his hand up.
Sure, I just want to say a couple of words. First, that the county is absolutely committed to working with this committee and APS staff for a successful school opening. We are in somewhat uncharted territory, but we have been meeting. We've also looped in our Arlington County Police Department, which plays a pretty major role in trying to keep the areas around our schools safe. So more to come on that. I did want to mention a couple of things in terms of the county's transportation system and our response to COVID. We have been operating through this event, but in some cases with reduced capacity. And it's particularly important with regard to public transit. We are affected by some of the same guidelines that Kristen is talking about with regard to school buses, we too have limitations on how many people we can carry on an ART bus or a Metro bus in order to keep the driver safe and in order to keep the passengers with appropriate distance. So right now, a 35 or 40-foot bus on ART is really capped at about 12 people. And the boarding is rear door only. No passengers are permitted to get near the driver. And that is likely to continue through the fall. So I just wanted to mention that, but we are strongly supportive of a remote drop-off to decongest the frontage around schools. We're very supportive of anything we can do to promote walking and biking because we think that is a healthy, safe option, at least for some additional increment of students that are coming back.
Thanks, Dennis. Okay, so it looks like Payne is next. Payne is our student member, as you all know, but he graduated. So congratulations to Payne. We will miss you next year, but you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to apologize. I was in another meeting. It's been a busy week, so I'm glad I could come on here at the end, and I was able to see some good input from everybody. So yes, I have graduated, and next year I will be off to Cornell for urban and regional studies. So I'm really excited, and it's a perfect program. There's so many, I would say, transportation enthusiasts in a sense, and it's the perfect, it was all kind of, came through at the last minute, but oh my gosh, the program is amazing, and I can't wait to hopefully come back to Arlington someday. And it's just awesome.
Just to applaud. That is so awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations, Payne.
Right.
Thank you, guys.
We look forward to seeing how you change the world. All right, so there are hands up. I don't know if they've just been left up and they weren't taken down. Jim Larson, did you raise your hand again?
I'm okay, sorry.
John Carton, I put his question into the chat.
Okay, let's see here. So John's question, how many drivers do we think we will have at the start of school? How is the current environment affecting the recruitment of drivers?
Bus drivers?
I'm assuming these are bus drivers.
Yeah.
Yes, bus drivers. School bus drivers, right, John?
That's correct.
Yeah. Kim, if Kim is on, perhaps she might want to address that.
I'm on. As of March 1st, we had 171 school bus drivers. We will have some folks who may retire, some folks who are not able to work due to COVID, but we don't have a particular number. We are still advertising and accepting new employees to become drivers. Does that answer your questions?
John Carton, do you have a follow-up to that?
Well, I'm just curious if there's concern about having enough drivers to be able to make all the runs that we need to do.
Well, we are trying to prepare ourselves to be in the best position and in the frame of mind to conduct all the trips that we have, because we will have to, as Kristen said, do some synchronizing or doubling of routes going around and around. But at this time, we don't have our a specific number to say who will be back, because as you know, they're off for the summer and they don't return back to July. Well, they used to return back in July for summer school, but we won't see them until August 24th for the mandatory in-service.
Contract as of a particular date?
So did they sign a contract as of a particular date?
Their contracts are concurrent. Their contracts start for them to return back. If we had summer school, they would be returning back July 7th. And during that time, we will have about 80 drivers who need to have their physicals.
So Kim, since they're not returning for summer school, are their contracts still starting on July 1, or are they later?
No, they're still starting on July 1. I'm sorry, well, they start, everybody, the budget starts July 1. But if we were to do summer school, but everything is virtual, they would come back normally July 7th to do the summer school transportation.
Okay, John?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Thanks, Kim.
No problem.
All right. Let's see here. So it looks like Payne and Nancy, your hands are still up. I'm assuming they were left up, but if not, if you click on the hand icon, it'll lower your hand after you've raised it. We do have a question in the chat room. This is something I was thinking about earlier. So Jillian, do you want to actually state the question about extended day?
Sure, there we go. It's not, I don't think we have an answer to it. I think it's just something to keep in mind. But the transportation patterns that we saw before COVID were heavily influenced by extended day and the fact that many students would just stay in the building, especially after school. So we should keep in mind that there will be decisions made about extended day and other childcare options, and those will influence who needs transportation. And it's all endogenous. It all affects, one decision affects the next, but we shouldn't forget that.
Yeah, thank you. I see Dennis's hand is up. Nope. Okay. So the floor is open. Does anyone have any comments? Speak now or forever hold? No. Kristen,
Payne has a question in the chat.
Pardon me?
Sorry, Payne has a
question in the chat.
This is Nancy.
Yeah, I guess Payne is asking about, is there any update to the art student pilot? Considering COVID, are we trying to add more students to lessen the bus ridership? So Kristen, yeah, any updates on the art bus pilot and if it's changed during COVID?
Only that we did not receive funding for the pilot once we had to redo the budget due to COVID. So we had about 25,000 in there for the start of the year before COVID, and then after COVID, we did not. So I think, one of the things we will try and focus on is certainly just simply marketing transit to our students. I know a lot of them kind of got used to it, so I don't want to see them fall off. We still have the iRide card, so it's still $1 each way. And if, whenever we can start it up again, I want to be able to start it up again. I wish I had better news.
Okay. So Jim Larson, was your hand back up?
So we're doing a little research on the iRide right now, card you just mentioned. And I mentioned earlier what the people that fund us allow us to do or don't do. And tomorrow, I go back to it again, I'll be discussing that very subject. Because one of our challenges is what we do at Arlington Transportation Partners in the county is reaching out to business. And as you all know, we have a special promotion and work with the public school system. So I'm not sure the state fully understands that, but I will be spending an inordinate amount of time to make sure they get what we're doing. And you cannot apply the same rules to outreach for business to school system. So I hear what you're saying. We were just talking about this today. So thank you for bringing that up. I'll tell them you told me we should do it, and that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Dennis.
Yeah, I just wanted to just give the group a sense of transit operations in response to COVID. So right now we have limited capacity on the buses. We have rear door only boarding. So people cannot approach the fare box. So all of the ART bus operation, all of Metro bus operation is rear door only, and we are not currently collecting fare. That will probably hold true well into the new school year. So if a student chooses to ride an ART bus and they board rear door, they will not be required to pay a fare. All of the transit properties in the region are looking at when will we actually get back to fare collection, because ultimately from a budgeting standpoint, we are going to need to collect fares. But at least for the start of the school year, I would anticipate the operation that we have out there today is going to remain the case.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Lynn Rivers.
Yes, I just wanted to add on top of that, the level of service that we're operating. Dennis mentioned earlier, we've been running a Saturday level of service since the beginning of the pandemic. And we added a couple of additional all-day routes today, actually. And we're looking at the end of August to going to a weekday level of service. So we'll have basically all of our routes running all day, not with the increased frequency, but we will have access on all routes by the end of the summer. And that's the same for Metro as well. We're in coordination with all of the jurisdictions because, as you all probably know, people are transferring from one transit system to another. So we're all working in lockstep as far as providing the services. So just wanted to make sure that you knew that we're adding all-day service by the end of August.
Thank you. Dennis, do you have another comment, or is your hand just back? Okay. Jillian.
So I wanted to thank everyone for those comments about transit and just put in a plug. I want to plant a seed because I am hopeful and optimistic that we will get to a point where we're back into normal life, where we're doing things like going back to full transit. And one of the things that I know we've talked about that's so hard about adjusting transit schedules to suit the school system or to do any of the other things that you might do in adjusting transit schedules is that people are used to, they're in the habit, they expect their bus at a given time. So changing the schedule is a big deal. And I just want to plant the seed that as we come, whenever it is in the future, when we come out of the crisis, or when we come out of the pandemic, that when we return to full transit schedules, we, of course, no one will have a habit. No one will know when to expect a bus. And so if there are tweaks that we can make to the schedule to make the transit schedule serve the school system, I hope we'll look at that. And I hope we will take advantage of that opportunity as we get to that very hopeful moment.
Thanks, Jillian. Jim Larson.
I said I didn't lower my hand, but maybe I should say something anyway. I'm kidding.
Okay, I want to give the 10-minute warning. We've got 10 minutes remaining in our scheduled time. And the floor, I don't see any hands raised, so if you've been shy and you don't want me to call on you, now's the time. No, Oh, Kristen.
Okay, thank you. Bingo. No, I just, so we're, a lot of this is under development. We're working through it. We've got county ourselves working on walk zones, working on hub stops, working on remote drop-offs. So, and then kind of thinking through the communication plan. So I know we don't typically meet over the summer, but as plans start to solidify, if anyone is interested, I would certainly be interested in getting as many of you as possible back together to kind of chunk through what we've got. And, we'll need help in getting the word out. I mean, obviously, we've got lots of APS communications channels, but being able to get information into people's hands prior to school start would be most appreciated. So if you're up for getting together one more time before school starts, I'll put out a feeler in the next few weeks or so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think doing these things virtually makes it easy to participate or to join. I'd be happy to help. Are there any final thoughts or questions before we wrap up?
I think Eric Goodman had a note in the chat. Eric, you want to ask?
Well, I think bicycling is probably one of the best ways to get people to school, beyond the walking zones. So just wondering if there's any way that I guess APS could utilize volunteers in the biking community that might be able to help with, getting at least helping routing kids to school, maybe, make it a little easier for them.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I think, maybe what we can do is, I did sort of run some ideas by Henry and Katie, Lauren and I, you're talking about walking school buses. So maybe we can get together and brainstorm some ideas and look at schools that, maybe have the greatest opportunity for biking. I know Henry led a bike train, just a one-person bike train off to HP, I think it was, with a student who lived in his neighborhood. So, I think there's a lot we could kind of do around that and, getting kids comfortable with their rides, and teachers as well. Getting them comfortable with their rides. I think Catherine, I don't think Catherine was able to join us tonight, but, she rides every day. It'd be great to have someone like her kind of mentoring some of our other staff.
Yeah, can I say something? Talking about biking, it's not always for all the schools, especially, the Kenmore route going from the south side to Kenmore. There is very little space on the sidewalks to ride a bike.
So what other cities are doing is they're closing down a lane of traffic and putting in temporary protected bike lanes.
Oh, that'd be useful.
Right? It's something like that could really open up transportation options that move a lot of people in a little bit of space and that don't have the resource intensity that other things have.
But Julian, also we have to remember that Carlin Springs is a very busy route that it's, if we close one lane, it's going to create more traffic and getting out of this the south side. It's our main road, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of things to think about, but interestingly enough, lots of studies have been done about how when you close space for cars, that traffic actually disappears. that people just don't drive as much, which is great. But also, we are in the middle of the pandemic, so I think it's worth thinking about how much traffic are we actually seeing and whether there's room to reallocate this space, at least during the pandemic.
Okay.
I think we have Nancy has her hand up, and we've got a couple minutes left. So, was your hand up, Nancy, or was that a?
I really have a problem with the hand and thinking that I have to click the hand so I can talk. I wanted to ask, I think the likelihood that anything's going to get closed off on Crown Springs is pretty minimal, and the county staff can speak to that just because of the amount of traffic that's on that road. But I know that Henry Dunbar at one point was going to try to work with some families to try to come up with a bike route from the area that Jeanette is talking about to Kenmore using the back streets. And I wondered if we ever got anywhere on that, but maybe that's a topic of conversation because there are ways not going on Crown Springs, maybe that we could do that. So that's one question. Then the other thing, I know we only have a couple of minutes, but we have several staff members, John Mikovice and Josh Phobe, and several staff members here. We've talked all about the students, and I'm wondering about the staff perspective about being on public transit and driving or biking or walking. Do you think we could incentivize more people to do that? Are you concerned about being on the buses? Because I know many of you use that. So I wanted to ask that question because we only talked about the kids and the families.
Josh or John?
Staff will come up and tell us.
Yeah, John Mikovic, sorry.
Yeah, hi. I think the school board and staff and the leadership team have done a lot to help plan for the fall. We'll just see what happens. Personally, I'm not doing much commuting, which is strange because it's actually free to use public transportation right now, but I'm doing what you're supposed to do and staying safe. I'm very encouraged to hear all of the suggestions that I think in the long term can put more of the responsibility for transportation on the families and the students, and maybe in the long term, less reliance on the big yellow buses, which maybe can't do everything for everyone. So I think it's very encouraging to hear a lot of the strategies that are being thought of, including using more public transportation and making the schedules work for students. So I think it's very encouraging, but there's so many different moving parts, so we really can't really tell at this point how it's all going to fit together. And as Nancy Van Doren said, I think it's going to take a long time and a lot of adjustments to get things in continuous improvement.
Thanks, John. Josh?
I'll just, from a teacher side of things, just from the, I'm on this committee as a parent, but I'm also a teacher too. And I think from the teacher side, you're probably going to actually see less public transit, not more, only because there is a whole lot of concern going into this coming back to school that the interactions and possibilities of on public transit is going to make them just add to the level of anxiety, because there is a lot of anxiety on the staff side. You might see potentially some more biking and walking, but I don't think you're going to see much rise in public transit.
Lynn Rivers?
Yes, just to respond to that, and we know that there are some anxieties out there. We are in the process now of finishing up a safety video to talk about how safe it is to use public transit and the things that we're doing, the increased amount of cleaning that's being done, even down to the actual air filters that we're using on the buses. So what I can do is I can send that to you, Kristen, and maybe that's something that you could send out through your channels. And that way people will understand all the things that we have been doing and then the increased efforts that we've done to get people comfortable in coming back to transit.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. Lauren Hassel.
Yeah, I was just thinking if there's a video option that we could do, we could model after what Lynn is talking about for school buses to reassure families, and the same with walking and biking as well. Maybe we can enlist. I know AETV will be very busy, but maybe we can enlist them to do a couple of PSA type things that we could get out there.
Thanks, Lynn. We have Jim Larson again.
So just echoing what Lynn said, that video and she's talking about, that's like one thing. We're going to come up with multiple solutions to put out there, as Lynn knows, to make people comfortable with return to transit. It's a big issue. I think you all know it, and we're going to work very hard on that and try to make it happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. I see hands up. I think I just want to, they might just have been left up, but John Mikovic, do you have another comment? Okay. I think that's it, and we are 2 minutes past. So I think we'll adjourn. Do we need? I think officially, do we need a motion to adjourn? But I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I thought this was really great. I think it worked out well. I hope you feel the same, and hopefully. Thank Kristen and all the APS folks and Dennis and all the staff folks for coming from the county side. But yeah, I think this worked out quite well. Kristen, any final thoughts?
Nope. I just like to thank everybody for joining tonight. I'd like to thank Dennis for getting us to the point where we could have this videoed and televised. So it was definitely a team effort all around, and thank county staff, Pemlock, David Wood, and Mr. Farr, whose first name escapes me at the moment, but thank them all for doing this for us. And I hope we had some folks watching. I know it's an exciting Monday night activity, but this was good. I appreciate everyone's feedback. And as we kind of work together on this plan, I'm going to reach back out to you for sort of your feedback and input on it and your help. This is a big job. Someone asked me to join a meeting today, and I said, I can't. I'm trying to reorganize the entire transportation framework in 3 weeks' time. I'll get back to you. So there's a lot going on, and these are, as Dennis said, uncharted waters. And Jillian, you asked about, flexibility. Yeah, we're going to have to build in flexibility because, we're headed down one path and in one direction, but as we all know, these times things can change, and they can change in a dime. So the name of the game is planning, preparedness, and flexibility. So that's where we're headed. So thank you again, and thank you to John Armstrong. Thank you for picking up the chairpersonship when I made the leap to APS. It's been a good partnership, and I've appreciated you and your insights. So I look forward to working with Josh and Elizabeth. I also want to thank Janeth for being our vice chair. And for keeping the voices of the Carlin Springs community in our thoughts. We know we've got a big project going on in Carlin Springs still to make that a safer area. And we will continue. We'll plan to meet next year. We'll set the meeting agendas and the times. And maybe some point next year, we will meet in person. But
hey, can everybody turn their cameras on for a minute so I can take a picture of the screen? I think you all are one of our best. You are one of our first committees to be meeting jointly this way. So please, I would love to take a picture if you guys would put your pictures on for a minute.
Mm-hmm. Let me, I need to go fix my hair, Nancy.
Come on, John, you look great. Somebody's outside. That's a cool.
I'm going to hold up John. I'm going to hold up John Carton.
And
All
soon
right.
they're going to 7 by
Perfect.
7, so you can have 49 on the screen.
We're not yet. We're not yet. I wish we could. Thank you. That looks great. Lauren, you're outside. That's great.
I thought I heard birds or something, Lauren.
Mosquitoes too.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And thank Christian, good luck. This is a tough job.
It is.
We're glad we have that you're on it, but it is best of luck in figuring out
Thanks.
this stuff.
You're in it with me.
Yeah, well, we're here anytime you
All
need
right.
us.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Good
Good night.
night.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Hi, everyone.
John says bye.